what better way to start your morning than with an English breakfast quiche, a modern take on an old favourite. Now this quiche has a creamy set which is a little bit different from a usual ready-made quiche. It has two main steps, the pastry base and the filling with all those tasty ingredients like tomatoes, mushrooms and bacon. So I'm going to start with the pastry base, and I've got 300 grams of plain flour which I'm going to add to the food processor. I've got half a teaspoon of salt, and I've got 150 grams of cubed butter which has been chilled from the fridge. Now, if you haven't got a food processor, that's fine. You can just use your hands to rub the butter into the flour. So I'm going to pulse this, and what I'm looking for is a breadcrumb-like consistency. So that looks perfect, so I'm going to add in my egg yolk. And I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of cold water. And I'm going to pulse that till it comes together as a dough. So that looks perfect, so I'm going to flour my surface and turn out the dough. I'm going to make it into a ball, and then I'm going to roll it out until it's ½ centimetre thick. So that's looking good. I've got a 25 centimetre, 10-inch loose bottomed tart tin, and I'm just going to measure it so I know I've definitely got an overhang all the way around, and yes I have. Now a tip for picking up your pastry to put it onto the tart tin is using your rolling pin. Just gently roll it over and you can pick it up with relative ease. Bring that towards me, and then I can layer it over. And I give it a little wiggle, it helps it settle in, and roll it out. And then what you want to do, you want to push the sides in really gently, just to get all the pastry into the corners and ensure all the filling sits nicely in the base. So now I'm going to prick the base with a fork. And this needs to chill in the fridge for around 10 minutes. So my base has been chilling for 10 minutes. Of course, I've made the pastry today, but of course you can pre-buy a pastry case so you don't have to make the pastry. I've preheated my oven to 200 degrees, and that's 180 if it's fan assisted. And what I'm going to now is blind bake the pastry case. Now what that actually means is I'm going to use baking paper, and a really easy way to do this is just to scrunch it all up and lay it on the base. And I'm using baking beans, but if you don't have baking beans at home, you can always use dried pasta. And what this actually does is it flattens the pastry and makes sure it doesn't rise during cooking. And this is going in the oven for 15 minutes. So now I'm going to cook my bacon and mushrooms, and what I've got here is 8 slices of streaky bacon which I've cut in half. So I'm just going to turn my pan on to a medium heat and then add in the olive oil, about a tablespoon will do, and put the bacon in. So the reason I'm actually frying the bacon off, because it will be cooking in the oven as well, is because it brings out the flavour and it crisps it up and gives it that nice texture. So that's looking great. So I'm going to move the bacon onto my plate. And I've got 10 forestier mushrooms, which I'm going to add to the same pan. So all the juices combine and give that lovely flavour. So I'm going to cook these mushrooms for about 3 minutes or until they've softened. I blind baked the pastry case for 15 minutes, then took it out of the oven and removed the baking beans and the parchment paper. I then baked it again for 10 minutes until it was golden brown. So it's cooled now, and I'm going to trim the edges just to make it look nice and neat. Okay, so I'm just going to remove the excess pastry. And I'm going to line the base with 2 to 3 tablespoons of tomato ketchup. And I'm just smoothing it all the way around so the whole surface is covered. I've got 3 tomatoes that I've halved, and I'm going to place them around the base. So now it's time to add my bacon and my mushrooms. And I'm scattering them around. So that's looking great. Now I've got 300 millilitres of double cream and 2 large eggs, which I'm going to add to it and whisk. I'm also going to season with some salt and pepper. Get that mixed up. So that's looking perfect. Now before I pour it in, what I'm going to do is bring in a baking tray because I don't want to pour it in without having some stability, and this will allow me to take it over to the oven without spilling anything. So I'm just pouring it in. I'm pouring it in one corner and letting it spread through the base and covering the ingredients. Not completely covering. You can still see some of the mushrooms, tomatoes and bacon. So the oven's on 200 degrees or 180 if it's fan assisted, and I'm going to bake this for around 25 to 30 minutes until the egg is set and it's nice and golden. So here's my quiche. It's completely cooled, and a really good tip for getting out the tin is to take a bowl, turn it upside down. You can also use a jam jar as well, by the way. Place it on top carefully and just allow the tin to drop down. And I'm going to take it over to my stand and gently place it on top. And there you have it, English breakfast quiche. Absolutely delicious.